I'm very pleased to see the very strong interest in this webinar with over 1,600 registrations from all over the world. This webinar comes right after the successful conclusion of the landmark 8th International Nitrogen Conference hosted by the German government from Berlin earlier this week. In a few hours, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2021-2030 will be formally launched as part of the 2021 World Environment Day celebrations. The new decade calls for the protection and revival of ecosystems all around the world, with focus on resetting our relationship with nature. The UN Decade runs from 2021 through 2030, which is also the timeline for the Sustainable Development Goals and the horizon that scientists have identified as the last chance to prevent catastrophic climate change, led by the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. The UN Decade aims to build a strong, broad-based global movement to ramp up restoration and put the world on track for sustainable future. That will include building political momentum for restoration, as well as thousands of initiatives on the ground. On nitrogen, one of the big challenges is summed up by the slogan, everywhere and invisible. Nitrogen losses are hard to see, whether we are talking about diffused pollution from agriculture, wastewater, or nitrogen oxides emissions from burning fossil fuels. Nitrogen deposition affects ecosystems in many ways. In general, we see that when nitrogen deposition increases, natural biodiversity decreases. For example, the consequences of excess nutrient leaching and runoff for freshwater and marine ecosystems involve hypoxia and coastal eutrophication, leading to an increased number of dead zones, which have quadrupled in size since 1950. The depletion of nutrient stocks in agriculture soils in nutrient-poor parts of the world poses a risk for ecosystems and biodiversity by encouraging agriculture incursion into previously virgin ecosystems that contain nutrient stocks sufficient for crop growth. Ladies and gentlemen, like some of you at the webinar today, I was in Sri Lanka when nations negotiated and associated themselves with the Colombo Declaration on Sustainable Nitrogen Management, with an ambition to halve nitrogen waste by 2030. This was a massive step. A reduction of this magnitude would lead to immediate benefits in the fight against climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. It would also generate US dollars 100 billion in savings and foster innovation in the agricultural, energy, and transport sectors. Setting targets is one thing, but achieving them is another. If we are going to meet this one, then we urgently need to do the following: improve the performance of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers, increase the use of organic fertilizers, and boost the recycling of nutrients from agriculture. And we will also need to significantly reduce our consumption of meat and dairy and dramatically cut the amount of food we waste. Another challenge that looms large for us is the broad lack of awareness on this important topic. Policymakers and general public are poorly informed about the nature and scale of the nitrogen crisis. This is why the UN Global Campaign on Sustainable Nitrogen Management is so important. It aims to explain how tackling the nitrogen crisis triggers a cascade of other benefits, whether it's water, air, climate, biodiversity, or stratospheric ozone. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing a triple planetary crisis: pollution, biodiversity, and climate change, a crisis the likes of which humanity has never faced before. The disruption of Earth's nutrient cycles remains as urgent as global heating and biodiversity loss. So, we're going to need to treat these problems with the urgency they deserve. And that means we need to see a major upscaling of efforts from all walks of life and across all sectors: governments, academia, private sector, farmers, and civil society. Let us put our hands together and intensify our common efforts to promote sustainable nitrogen management for ecosystem restoration. I wish you all a very interesting and engaging webinar. Happy World Environment Day. Thank you.